Hey, welcome. We're doing building SaaS with Python and Django, if I can get the name of my own stream right. I am your streamer. I'm Matt Lehman, and I'm a software engineer, and we're here to do some code stuff today. And what's the point of this stream? We're here to learn about doing development of SaaS applications, software as a service, is what the jargon is, which is applications that exist online. How's it going, CK3? That's going great, thank you. So we're here to teach, or I'm here to teach, I guess, and have fun doing it, and just answer questions and hopefully show off some cool things in code. We are specifically looking at a project that I work on called College Conductor. So when we're talking about the software as a service, this is the domain that I'm working in. This is a side project that I have. It's a project that I have built out for my wife, who's an independent educational consultant, and it's all about college admissions and college tracking and all of this good stuff. As I say in all of these streams, this particular domain is not important for what we do here. It is the context for everything that happens. So the models that we use are schools and deadlines and those sort of things, but you don't need to know college admissions to learn something from the stream. At least I hope you don't. So that's who I am and what the product is. And before we get started, I just want to encourage you to chat. We got some chat going on the side. I'll drop some notes in there along the way. And ask questions if things are confusing to you, or if you just have a topic that you want to discuss. I'm happy to take little tangents and stuff too, as long as we keep it relatively within the realm of Python and web applications and stuff. I'm happy to field those. If we get philosophical and into some other subjects, I'll probably defer on those. Also, if you find this stuff useful, if you don't mind, share it on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. I'm MB Lehman there, same as my Twitch handle. That way you can keep up with this, or you can follow or sub on Twitch itself, and make sure you know when I'm streaming next time, which is usually on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. this hour right now. So without further ado, let's look at what we're working on tonight. So last stream I was working on a third-party integration. And it was an integration with a service that had a bunch of data that we were scraping together from that site. And I noted that the problem that I was facing is that I have data in College Conductor's database. I have this list of schools. And I have this third-party service that has data as well that I'm scraping from and putting into the database as well. But I need to be able to connect the dots between the schools that I have, which is about 2,000 schools, and the schools that come from this other service. In this case, it was called Prompt. And I noted that it's a very manual and tedious task. We walked through the process of, like, if you were to do this totally manually through the Django Admin dashboard, you'd be clicking around a lot, doing a lot of stuff. And so what I propose that we do is make some pages and some Django views that will actually make that go a lot quicker. So let me drop this issue into chat so that anybody else can follow along. So this is what we're working on tonight. Feel free to ask any questions. I'm still not used to like chatting and talking. Maybe I don't know, maybe I do that normally when I'm by myself. I don't think I do. Anyway, so what did I propose to do? I want to make an admin kind of dashboard that will give me, as the person with all the control, an ability to quickly churn through the data and make the connections that I need to make, and just do some stuff that code can do for me. Make some queries that I don't want to have to do myself. Scan the data in ways that I don't want to have to do myself, that I could, but if I can write some code to do this, then we can take a task that might otherwise take me 10, 20 hours and hopefully condense it down to just a couple. So it sort of takes the grind out of what might be considered sort of chore tasks. So if anything, I'm working up to chores that just need to be done to make the service more robust. Because context here. without these data connections, the college conductor service is just not that useful. So I want to be able to, let's bring up a school, for example. So we could say, whoops, excuse me. We could say University of Virginia, and we're not logged in, so let's try that again. Okay, so we're gonna say, go back to that University of Virginia page. And the integration that I had was to go to a different service called Prompt. This is actually the production data, and I'm missing that connection. So even though I have brought up my school list here, or an individual school, the actual value that is made possible by that third-party integration is not actually accessible yet, because although I've pulled the data from a couple different sources, I haven't connected the dots. So what I want to do is make a tool and essentially start. We're going to start off with some like a place to put tools, because I don't even have that yet, because this project hasn't needed it. So we're going to make essentially a support dashboard that will be protected. It will be something that's only accessible to staff level users on the system. And that dashboard is going to be some very straightforward links to the tools that we're going to make. So step one is to make this dashboard, this home for these tools to live, and then we'll actually get into the tool itself to start wiring up and connecting the data that we want to connect. Okay, that's context. If you have any questions, again, shoot them over in the chat. I'm happy to look at them, happy to stop and pause and take whatever questions people have. So my editor is Vim. I'm a longtime user of Vim. I guess that makes me old, but it works for me. And we're over here. So how do we even start? I guess we need to make the place for this stuff to live, which means a view. Nano's a fine tool. I'm not going to knock any other editors. There's plenty of good things out there. I do find that Vim works very well for me and is kind of and can be a real chainsaw for solving code problems. Okay, so nice. Let's look at where we can put this. I have a fairly standard structured Django application, and if you haven't used Django before, where am I? So this is the root of the project. This is everything in this conductor directory is considered a Django. Actually, the proper term for it is project. Project is the umbrella name for a Django application, and within an application, its major components are actually called applications. So that was I worded that poorly. Within a project, its components are called applications. So all of these directories here that you see are applications by and large. And if you dive into an application, there's a very standard structure of things that you'll notice that makes a Django app. And that will include stuff like models, views, forms, this apps file, and admin. These are standard files that will actually get generated by one of the template commands that Django includes. I think it's manage.py create app. Let's do an honest check. It's up here somewhere. Start app, excuse me. I always get these wrong. So this is why we check. So start app gives you the shell of an application that you can pull into Django. I don't need to make a new application tonight. That's not really where we're going. I had an application in mind that I wanted to use because I already have a place in College Conductor for support tickets, and that is my support app. So I think of support as just a namespace for anything that is support function. It's kind of being redundant, but the model that I have in here already is so if you went to College Conductor and you went to the bottom of the page and what's the name of the link? It's something like contact. Yeah, that's like a contact page. So if you hit up this form and submit something in there, it'll end up as a support ticket on my side in the database, which then I can address. So it's I'm not using something like what are all those help tools? Zendesk or something like that. I don't have a third-party integration there. I kind of kept it low fidelity. So at least it gave me a place to put tools related to people that are kind of at the staff level. So I think that's a good place for a view to live that's going to represent this kind of hook that comes in and adds support tools. So what can we start with? So let's start with the test case, because even though this is like support stuff, this is still stuff I want to be able to maintain reasonably well, and it's a good exercise to let people know how to do automated testing. So as I write these tests, these are going to be using Django style tests. If you have questions, let me know. So let's bring up the support. Hopefully if I did my job, good. I already have a test file, which is pretty primitive for this contact form because it doesn't really have to do a whole lot. I have kind of a happy path, and so anyway, that's immaterial to this particular thing that we're doing tonight. So what do I want to call this thing? Let's call it good name, like how about like a tools dashboard? Yeah, that sounds good. So we have our class, and it's going to be a test for a tools dashboard, and we're deriving from our test case. And the very first thing I want to ensure, before I've even written a single line of this code, I want to make sure that this is only accessible at a staff level. So if I make a request, so we want to check that this is a staff-only view, and staff. Okay, even more context, because I'm going to assume that you don't know Django. If you do, just bear with me. In Django, the default user model has a couple of built-in Boolean flags that determine from the get-go a certain base level of permissions. And those two flags are super user and staff. If you're a super user, you have full control over everything. You go to the admin console, you can see it all, and nothing is stopping you from doing anything. It's very powerful. You should have, maybe like one or two of those on a Django app, in my opinion. The staff level is the other Boolean. It's a is staff permission, and or just a Boolean on the user model, and it is a more constrained view of the world. Naturally, you're not a super user. So that will give, if you have staff access in the Django world, it'll give you access to the admin. But even the admin, like if you go in there at a default level for staff, you won't see any of the models that are there unless you're explicitly given permission. So it's still a pretty restricted model, but it's elevated over a standard user in the system. But for my purposes for this tools dashboard, I don't need super user power. It's not to that level of authority, but I don't want Joe user who's on my service to actually be able to access this view. So we're going to do a permission check on the view, and then we'll actually create the view and add the appropriate code to make sure that staff level is enforced. So what's the first thing that we need? We're going to need a request, and so I'm going to pull. I have attached to my test case class, which is a subclass from the Django test case. I put on a request factory so that I can quickly get access to certain things. So we want a get request, and let me make sure I got the syntax. Yep. Okay. It's been a while since I've used the request factory for this project, so got to remember all that syntax. So we have a standard get request, and I think this is actually going to even be anonymous, which is fine for the purpose of authorization. Although maybe we want to get just a regular user and assert, just so that we're like super certain that the thing that we're doing is not just on anonymous stuff, but on people who are logged in as well. So the thing that we can do is use the Factory Boy. So I'm using a Factory Boy package, which allows me to make Django models very quickly. And Django models, if you don't have that level of context, are what connect to the database. So they are your access into the database tables within the system. And so Factory Boy is a great package that allows you to make mock data for tests, and it's just really useful in that regard. And I also noticed I use MyPy, so I have it turned on for everything. So I need to have that none as the return type, as the type signature. Sorry, little detail. So how do we make an authenticated GET request for a user that is not at staff level? That is a good question. And I know that I made a helper method to do this. Okay. So we need to call authenticated GET instead of this, and it takes a user. This is where we pass in our user. Okay. It's been a while since I wrote view test. So a bunch of these streams previously have been me messing around with celery tasks and web scraping and other kinds of tests. So I haven't written a view test for Conductor in a bit. So we have a user that we've asserted that we're creating that is definitely with a staff level of false. And let's just do a check. Just run the test just for fun. It's not asserting anything, so of course it's going to pass. But we actually need to do something with it now. So we're going to reach into the views module. That's what the thing that I imported at the top, and I want to call this tools dashboard. We're going to pass in the request because I'm going to use function-based requests, or excuse me, function-based views. There's a couple different styles of views in Django. One are function-based views, which, as they sound like, they're a function that takes a request and the return value should be a response. The other is called a class-based view, which also takes a request and returns a response, but has a bit more ceremony to it. And while I'm a fan of class-based views at certain times, I think it makes sense for simple views that aren't going to be doing a lot, like this tools dashboard, to stick to a function-based view because it lends itself to a very short chunk of code on the other side. So we're going to check that this thing gets a response, and we want to assert, does Matt know his HTTP status codes? Assert 401? Essentially, when the request when someone hits this page, if they're not staff level, it needs to reject them with a permission error, and the HTTP status code. Yeah, function-based views are still a nice thing, especially if you can keep it simple and don't have a lot of code in there, very minimal. They're quick to use. So I think it's a 401. Now, why is it complaining? Ah, look at that. My module already knows that I'm missing a tools dashboard. That's cool. So this will fail because it's going to say I don't have a tools dashboard, which is totally true. And let's make one. So we want to say tools dashboard. And it's going to take a request, which is an HTTP request. Again, I'm using type checking syntax just to get the benefit of knowing that my code is using the types that I think it is. And what's a good docstring? So let's call this the entry point for all staff tools. And the reason I have to make this dashboard is kind of, there's a big reason. So if you start with a Django app, Django project, Django comes with a great admin interface. And it's great for browsing your models and going through that and just checking that stuff out. In my experience, and I've done some contracting work that has even tried to do this, it's actually quite difficult to extend that admin app. They really didn't design it with enough extension points, or any. Well, maybe that's a little too broad. It's not well designed for putting in custom code paths. They do have ways to execute actions like on models, which is a totally different subject. But if you need like links to different pages you want to go to, that it's really not super easy to do that. So by just making a different section altogether, we get around trying to hook into the Django admin, and we can just leave that it's pristine and set it in its place over there and let it do its thing and be great. And then give ourselves a place to actually just put simple links and that kind of stuff. So it's going to be kind of two destinations ultimately of the Django admin and this tools dashboard, but it makes a nice simple separation. Okay, so we have this, I've called it to the entry point for all staff tools. And what does it need to do right now? It needs to, it's going to return, it's going to render something. So we're using the render shortcut, which takes a request. And we're going to say, none of this stuff exists. So this will all fail in a big way right now. And we don't even need context at the moment. So, but this should be enough to like get a real view working. And coming back over here, yeah. So now we're kind of, I'm using test-driven development to sort of drive out the errors and sort of flush them out to know what to do next. So we've rendered a view, and the render is doing a lookup of the template, and the template is the thing that is going to be the HTML combined with dynamic data, if you have any, and will spit out what shows up on the view on the other side. But at this moment, we don't even have this file defined. So Django is rightfully blowing up and saying like, hey, you need to create this thing. It's a really good safety net to throw an exception, because imagine that you did think you had a template defined, but you in fact typed something wrong. Like I said, used something like totally spelled it wrong. I don't know why I would do that, but for this example, but just imagine an example where you had like index and you forgot the X or something like that. Django is really saving you from making a mistake and deploying that. Although you should be testing this out anyway, but it's trying to help you along the way. Yeah, silent failures are definitely the worst. So let's go over to our templates area. There are multiple ways to configure templates in Django, different styles. If you go on the official Django tutorial, you'll actually find that templates are suggested to put them in the application. Again, remembering your structure, Django project, applications are actually the components. So nomenclature is a weird thing, but it will say to put a templates directory within your application and then do that from there. What I like to do instead, because this is configurable in Django, is to use one templates directory at the root of the project and put my stuff in there, and kind of nest it that way, so that it's a separation that is nice, because it gives you clear, like, all my template files, all my HTML files are going to be in one location. It's personal preference, I suppose, but it's what I've gotten accustomed to. So that is why you see it like the way it's set up here. So we're going to go into support, into the contact area, and I'm going to go up a level and bring up the Vim Explorer. We'll create a file from here, and we'll call it tools-dashboard.html. And I need to write the file so that it will actually be on disk. And now we can go back to our test over here and run this. Whoops, what did I do? Did I call it Tools Dashboard? Ah, see? Silent, see? I already messed up. I called it Tools Dashboard instead of Tool Dashboard. Or maybe that's what it should be. Is it the Tools Dashboard? Yeah, it is. So let's do that again. Sorry. So this is Tools Dashboard, and now in my view, let's call it Tools Dashboard, because there's going to be more than one tool. The system totally works. Okay, so I am making an assertion before I even run this test that this will fail, and it will fail because it's going to return a status code of 200, and I'm asking for a 401, which is exactly what we want to test. Yeah. All right, the other thing I want to do is come up somewhere higher. Okay, I always get this mixed up. I do this basically every time I stream. If you think one day I would remember this, Python is not particular on the assertion order. Conventionally, I like to try and stay consistent in my files, so I like to put expected first with the actual data to test against second, or the response that came back second. So I did that in the right way. Now, what's the next thing we need to do? We need to make this test pass. So we need to get on the documentation because I don't remember. So we're looking for, what are we looking for? We're looking for Django authentication decorators. So I know that function-based views can use some decorators. There are a few that come out of the box, and I want to use one of them. Oh man. Okay. I wish that the messaging on test runners and things, and maybe PyTest is doing this now, is saying, left-hand side is actual and right-hand side is expected, and had stuff around that. Wow, where are we? We're on Japanese. How'd that happen? So this is the source code for the decorators, which is not really what we want, and it's not even the decorators we want. So I'm looking for a staff, Django staff only decorator. I think that exists. Just goes to show, I've been doing Django for like 5 years, and Django is a really big framework. It's a really great framework, I think, but it's big, and there are lots of things that you can forget. And I'm pretty sure this decorator exists. Maybe it's a mix-in, in which case maybe we do need a class-based view. But the thing that I'm looking for is somewhere in here. So here's a lesson as a developer. If you're new to development, sometimes you got to just read the docs. No way around it. And if anybody happens to know the permission decorator, just shout out in the chat. Or if you can find it faster than I can. So login required, that's a good one, but it's not quite what I'm looking for. User passes test is sort of the generic, like this is a cool decorator, like you basically give it a check of what you want, of what Boolean to evaluate to, and it'll get access to that. So, but I believe that there's even one more for, okay, we're getting warmer. This is permissions, so you can do it. There's a permission system. Come on, access mixin. Those are the views. And I don't even know if you can now see this. I'm scrolling pretty fast, sorry. So they're probably like buried way at the bottom. So it's basically describing every view that's part of the auth contrib package, which is a very useful package to do authentication. And if I can't find it, come on now. Well, shoot. I thought it was going to be an easy one. What can we do? We could use in the interim, to make it pass, we could find the permission or the user. Nope, getting the name wrong. What was it called? The one where you give it a check, user passes test, and then have the test be user is staff. We'll do that for now. I'm not wild about it, and I'll probably look it up offline and find out what the heck I was thinking of. Or I'll discover that it was something that, in past jobs that I've worked at, it was actually something built into that job, like it was like a utility decorator, in which case I will bring over that utility decorator. But we want to make sure that we just get through this. So let's bring in Django contrib, this guy right here, and come down over here. Django contrib auth decorators, user passes tests. And the test is going to be, so what's accepting? It's accepting the actual user. So it knows to, when you have this decorator, I guess it knows to pull, the user is attached to the request. So it must know how to pull that off the request and pass it in. So we're going to do and for now I'll just hang it at the top. So this is kind of the expedient thing. And sometimes you do this in coding and come back and refactor later. We will give it a good doc string. And we can also give it I'll punt on the type check too, because you guys don't care. Unless you do, let me know if you care. So check if the user has staff permissions. And we just want to return user is staff. And now we'll come down and on the tools dashboard, we'll say user, what was it called? User passes test, check is staff is the test. Now I don't know what return code this is actually going to do. Why are you complaining? Oh, it knows MyPy is there. Deal with it. Okay, so it's doing a 302. So that's a redirect. And where are you redirecting to? I could be okay with this if it's redirecting to like a login page. That's okay with me. So let's actually look at what that redirect is. And the redirect, where do they keep the redirect information? It's response. Oh man. It's one of the headers, I think. Oh, there it is right above. It's the location header. So let's check out, let's take a look at what location is. And we're going to print this because I'm lazy. And we're going to let it keep failing just so that it will print out the, and we can see it. So yeah, it's printing out to the login. That's fine with me. So I want to do this. I want to say 302 so that it will pass right now. We'll prove it passes. Okay. Still doing that printout, which we really don't want. But the next thing we want to do is that so we kind of have the confidence that this redirect is something meaningful and not garbage. Let's say that the reverse of reverse is the way to do the URL lookup of a view. Well, okay, that probably just blew by some people. Django, you have views, and to actually map to a URL that you visit in your browser, there is a URLs file, and that file consists of of what are effectively routes, which are matching pairs between patterns and the actual view to connect to. And then, so in that file, and rather than make you guys just guess, let's actually look at the URLs file. So you give it this set of patterns, and you give it the name for your URL that you want, and then you have to name this thing. And this is like a canonical name that Django can use. And the reason you define these names is so that anywhere in the system you can use that as a global identifier, so that rather than coding to /accounts/login as the thing that I want to check for in my test, I can actually use this reverse function, which will look up that string for me. The benefit of that seems kind of weird at first, like why would you have this extra layer? But the benefit is if you ever decide you want to move your URLs around, you get the one layer of indirection, or abstraction, whatever term you want to use, and it's a name that you can point to rather than like hard-coded stuff. So we're going to use reverse, which is the system to look up the actual URL route. And the thing that we care about is login, which is coming from where? It's coming from contrib. And okay, so it might, I'm just gonna guess that it's called, the name is login. I might be wrong, it might have to be a namespaced thing, but we'll see if that works. So what I really want to check is that the login is that in the response redirection location. And that will give me the confidence that the redirect is going to somewhere meaningful. Okay, so I guessed it right. So that the contrib auth app uses login as the name for the route. So having the reverse on login and checking its location is good. So we've effectively tested that this is staff only. There is a key point that is still missing here, though. That is, I don't think have the route connected. So, like if we look up contact, you know, we have this, I made this contact form, and but if I was to fire up Honcho, or Honcho is the tool that I use to actually work with Django locally. It fires up a bunch of processes. It's a really cool tool. It starts Django, it starts Celery, it starts my Webpack stuff, and it gives me a local site that we can go look at. So let's go over to Firefox and we'll go to the localhost site. If I could type, I think it's on 8080. Cool. Okay. So there is no URL yet connected for this tool. I can't like magically say tools dashboard and have that work. Like it, you know, we've got debug mode on and it says here are your routes. You don't have this thing. So even though we've made this valid view in Django, we don't have it connected anywhere on the site. So it's not accessible. So let's make it accessible. I want to connect it to what? I don't particularly care too much. Let's do, what can we do? Let's just make a support tools route. And long-term Django people will probably look at this and go like, what are you doing? Because I'm kind of hooking up individual views in the one top-level URLs file, and that's it's not going to scale long-term because this file will just get huge and bloated. But if you want to scale long-term, eventually you make a URLs file in your application. Remember, project application. So this is kind of the project level URLs file. You can also have individual application URLs files, and you can kind of include them. So you can make a hierarchy effectively. But the way I have my routes is they're sort of from multiple different places. So I'm using this one place to put all of my stuff for now, and it's working well for me because there's not a lot of views in the system. As I'm taking this approach because I want to experience the pain of this is getting to be too much, and I want to see obvious patterns emerge of like, okay, you're starting to put everything in this students group, so maybe that's enough now to merit going and creating a hierarchy and creating a students area and a students URLs file. But I'm just not at that level today. So coming back up to the contact area, I'll just kind of keep them localized together, and we'll call this support tools. Why not? And give this the name of tools dashboard. And in my naming, did I use underscores or dashes? I used dashes, so let's be consistent. Okay. So now we have this new path, and the web server restarted for us. So now if we come up here and we change this to support tools, how are we doing? Whoops, we got the contact form. I see what I did wrong. I didn't actually change the view. So even though we told it this new location, we're actually just using the same view. So that's not right. So we want to use tools dashboard, which is not imported yet. So let's come down to support and we'll get tools dashboard. Okay. Now, what are we going to get? Going to get a login page because it's staff protected. Okay, so this is actually success. This doesn't look like it, but it is. It's success because our template literally has nothing in it. It's not even extending from anything. So the next thing I think that we can do, and I don't even think that we need our views file open anymore. Or do we need a test? Oh yeah, we should test the OK response. So we want to test, we'll just call it test OK. Junky name, but it'll get the idea across. This time we want all the same stuff, except that we want the staff level to be true. And we're going to just assert that it's a 200, which indicates a good response and the user got access. It's sort of it's the inverse case of this, but I still like to have both just to still prove that it wasn't something else that was funny that was unrelated to is staff that was causing the redirect, that it was in fact the staff permission only. Okay, now I think we're done with this test file, and let's go back to this contact template, and I'm going to just steal from it. So it's using a base template, and the base template is it's got all the standard HTML5 tags. It's got the headers. It's got some extra stuff that I don't really care about, but it's bringing in Bootstrap and just giving a little bit of styling. This is going to give us enough styling so that we're not staring at like raw HTML in the lowest level form. We probably don't need this level of quality for backend support tools, but if I'm going to be the one looking at doing some kind of chore task, I want to look at something that's at least reasonable. Okay, let's we can call this come on, Vim. Change inner block. Nope. Forget it. Tools dashboard. Give it a title, and I'll just comment this block out for now, just so we can see what it looks like with nothing. Okay, So it's given me the boilerplate. There's something else that I want to do before I consider this tools dashboard thing done. And really, I was about to say really it is done, but no, let's even put some information, get some context in there and some basic information that I'll discuss in a second. The other thing I want to do is, when I'm logged in here, this admin link, I hope you can guess, is not accessible to your everyday user. This is something that I added to the template that kind of is a convenience, so that if I'm logged in on my production site, I can quickly jump to the Django admin without having to go up to the URL and manually hack in the URL to get it there. It's just a shortcut. It's turned out to be convenient. I want something similar for the tools. So let's do a search for admin, because I don't even remember what template it's in. And it's in this navigation template. Okay, it looks like I put for this thing that I wanted only the super user to see the Django admin. That's fine. I'm going to essentially copy this block, put it in here, and we're going to change this. Remember, I told you that the Boolean is called staff, so we're going to change this to staff, and the route is tools dashboard. Remember, now we're using the name that Django wants to use. Whoops, that's another typo that Django would fail on. And I'll just call this tools. So when Django renders this template, it's going to come to this. This URL is basically the template version of reverse that we saw in the Python code. And it's going to stick that string path in here of /support/tools/ and that will be our link to our tools. So we save that, come back over. Now I have a tools link. Let's see if we can click between them. Oh, of course, that's going to take me somewhere that doesn't use my template. Let's go dashboard, tools. Okay, great, looks good. Okay, now what? What do I want to do? Let's go back and look at the issue. I don't know that I put anything else in here. So I'm actually not going to punt on this one because I have a different issue for starting another page. But we're continuing this one, and this is the part that I think I still want to do, is this parenthetical here of some progress statistics. The whole point of this dashboard is to get to this automated tooling, right? Which we haven't even touched on yet. We've just been making a framework for tools to live in, and you've gotten to see how to make a view, how to test that view, and how to do some permission checking. Hopefully that was valuable to you. If you're here for the automation, we're getting there. But now we need to talk about what is it I actually want to automate. College conductor. This is where I need to bring up a little tiny bit of the domain so you have a framework for this. Part of what College Conductor is doing is showing application deadlines. That's actually the core of what it cares about. The idea is an independent educational consultant, or a college admissions counselor at a school, something like that, has their student view, and their student says, I want to go to 12 schools. And each of those schools uses a different system for their application. And those applications come in a variety of types. The U.S. university and college system has sort of coalesced around these 4 categories roughly. There's one called the Common App, there's a Coalition App, there's a Universal College App, and then there are plenty of schools that still have their own individual application. So what I need to do, the thing that is happening right now, is I have a set of Common Apps that I've pulled from the Common App website. I have a task that runs weekly, in the background on a Sunday morning, and it checks the Common App website and looks for member schools. Because that list grows, sometimes that list shrinks. And what I need to do is make sure that my list of schools has that connection to Common App schools, so that I have that data on hand, so that I can present it to the user. Sorry. So that's the piece that I don't have right now, is the actual connection. I have the 1,000 schools that are Common App schools. I have the 2,000 schools that are Conductor schools, and connecting the dots there is painful. What I want my automation tool to do is roughly take the name of the Common App school. I extracted that when I did the web scrape, and I'm going to split that up into its constituent parts. Like the example I looked at last week was one of the State University of New York. They have a bunch of schools that's SUNY. So SUNY Albany or something like that. And so it might be SUNY Albany College or SUNY Albany University, something like that. I want to throw out a bit of that information when I'm searching for this stuff. If I'm searching in my database for college, the word college or the word university, the list of schools that's going to come back from that kind of search is stupidly long, because almost any school includes either university or college in their name somewhere. There are some that don't quite, but it will be too much noise. I won't be able to filter. What I do want, do I have an idea where I can test specifically IEI? That's a good question, man. I have seen services that will basically, what will they do? They'll kind of like run a virtual machine for you. Thank you, Browser Stack. That's the one I was thinking of, where you get access to those sort of things. So check out the recommendation from TCK3 there, and see if you have any luck. So getting back to the automation though, we throw out college, we throw out university, because they're junk data, and I want my page to say, here's the Common App school you need to connect to a school in your own system. Here are the searches for, we search for the word SUNY in my list of schools, and we search for Albany in the list of schools. And between those two terms, hopefully I have a matching school on my side. And I want to be able to show the list of schools that are possible matches and be able to click and then have it make a connection like automatically. And the alternative is going through the admin and bringing up search dialogues and doing searches by hand and typing out all this information, and it would just be a mess. So that's where we're going. That's the ultimate goal. So hopefully you have enough context. Okay, so why did I talk about that before I committed this dashboard thing? I want to list how many schools I have left to do. So let's look at a model. We have did I put it? Where did I put it? Vendor? I might need to find the model. Nope, not vendor. Planner. These are some of the apps that I have. Where'd you go? Okay. No, that's a school application. That's something else. Where are you? Common. Ah, okay. I always forget about this app name. So I created another app called Trackers. Trackers are the things that are going to be doing the scanning of these other services to make sure that I have all of the Common App, the Coalition App, the Universal, those pieces of context. And I made a model in here that you probably are having a hard time seeing all of that, so let's just clear out some of the stuff for a minute. I made a model, and it has some statuses. So when the background task ran over that weekend time frame and pulled out all the schools, it pulled out the name that it could find. It pulled out the slug that will point back to the Common App, which is something useful. But this is the line that we really care about. There's a status associated with the school, and I want to either consider it as tracked, as you can see up above, The college conductor does not care at the moment about international universities. So there are some Common App schools that are like in Ireland, a couple other places that I remember seeing, like Spanish-speaking countries, that, I'm sure they're great schools, but it's just not super relevant to most US seeking students. And so I don't plan on tracking them. So I want to be able to filter those out. And I want to explicitly have, like, to make a decision of, this is going to be something that is not a tracked school. Like, I just don't care about it, don't want to put it in my database, whatever. But the thing that I want to work from is a count of all of the pending schools. So that pending is simply the state of, I, as a person who has this chore to do to connect my data together, have not taken the time yet to look at a school that's in the pending state and connect it to the data. As kind of a slight bit of gamification, I essentially want to show in the toolbar, like this, I close that. In this template, the count of how many pending things are left. And I want to put it in like a big font of, like, here's how much you actually have left to do. Hopefully when I get to the end of this task, it'll just be like a big goose egg, and I'll give me a nice warm fuzzy feeling. Or if the weekly task adds one or two more, I can come to the dashboard and see, oh, I need to make sure that I get that one or two schools handled. So that's the goal. So I want to put that statistic in there, and let's just mock out what that might look like. So I know there are roughly 1,000 Common App schools. So let's just say, for now, hard code it, 1,000 Common App schools to go. And see if that seems horrible or looks okay. Yeah, it looks horrible. So, and the reason it looks horrible is because I'm not using any sort of grid yet. So let's see if I can, we've got a grid. There's a container that was added for this contact form, which I'm stealing from right now. And this is all Bootstrap syntax. If you're not familiar with this is just not straight up HTML, the web. This is a thing that I was using. So I don't think we'll need the card. So let's delete the card. And so this is going to give us a column. The Bootstrap grid is 12 columns by default, I think. And if you're not familiar with grid design, it's a way to lay out things on a page so that you get things that line up. It's actually, grid design dates back to long ago, way before the web. It's in books, magazines. The grid is something that's very well studied by designers. And Bootstrap brought over a version of the grid to make it easier for folks that aren't designers like us, or maybe you're a designer, but your average developer, and give them a toolbox to make web interfaces that are maybe not gorgeous, but not terrible either. So let's change our column count. So what's happening right now is I put a container around it. It's got one row defined. That's this row right here. And you define a row, and then you define the columns in the row. So you can kind of think of like a bit like a table. And my current setting was too narrow. So it's only, if the page is only from like here, over by the logo to over by the logout, if it has that bounding box, and I think this is like some padding, then it was fitting in a very small space and using only half that space because I was only using 6 of 12 columns. So let's try using 10 columns and see how that widens things out. Okay. And again, I'm not designing this for users, so it doesn't have to be just like amazing looking, but just a little bit of motivation of how much is left to go will be good. So we have 1,000 Common App schools to go. We want to replace that with the data, the real data. So let's come over back. Let's go back to our view, which is now up here. And now we're going to need context. Oops. So context in Django speak is the data that gets mixed in with a template to actually render something. And we'll show how that rendering happens in a bit. But this is where all your data actually goes. So we're also going to bring up our test file again. And now we're going to go, what do I want to do? Let's do it. I want to test the context. That's really what I care about. And we're going to mock. I'm going to use the mock library. And that is going to be at conductor support views render is the thing that we're going to mock out. So what I'm doing right now is taking, in these first two tests, we left the render method as is. So it actually ran all the machinery in Django to that's why when we didn't have the template, it failed because it tried to render it, tried to actually do the combination of the template and the context and all that stuff. In this test, I'm not actually wanting to do the render. What I'm really checking is that the data that I want to show up on the template is going to be the data that goes in the view. So this will give me kind of a contract between the view says I'm going to provide this, and then when I go over to the template to actually plug in this, then I can have some faith that it'll be accurate. So we want to have, we're going to steal from this again. And this time we need to have render is going to be injected by mock, and that will be a mock.magic mock, I believe. Am I using? Yep, okay. And I'm going to steal from here because I've done this before in this file already. And whoa. Where was I? Okay, I yanked too much. Okay. So now we don't care about the response. So in normal terms, render creates an HTTP response that gets returned. Like that's what we did up here. And an HTTP response is a class in Django that has a status code, has things that you can check on it. This time though, we've mocked out render. So we're actually going to essentially intercept the stuff that's passed to render. And that's what's going on here. So what this is doing is saying whatever you were called with, that's what call args is. Look in, it breaks it down. It's a tuple that has the normal list-based arguments is at the 0 index, and the keyword arguments are at the 1 index. And so it's saying for all the list index, give me the third item, because remember Python is 0 indexed. So if you break it down, each one of these is a list kind of argument. Request is the first one, the template name is the second one, and context is the third one. So that is why this thing is named context on the other side. So we now have our context, and I want to assert, what is it I want to assert? I want to assert that, well, let's go ahead and actually assert the value. So I want the context to have a count of Common App schools that are pending. So I don't have that data yet, but I will in a minute. So this is the Common App count. That's a decent enough name. This will fail right now with a key error. Why are you need a type annotation? Oh, who cares? You're going to be, I forget I'm not in Python 2 anymore. What's the type syntax for, is it this side? Is that right? Okay, I think that's right. We're on the test OK method, so that's not the test we want to test. So let's test this thing out, and we should get a key error. And we do. Okay. So let's make the test pass. And we'll do that by plugging in this key of common app count, and we're going to hard code the value of 1. Okay, so it has the key and it has that. But that's not obviously not where we leave it. That's not helpful. So what we really need to do is I want to make two common app schools. So that model we were looking at just a second ago in the trackers file. I want to make 2 of these common app trackers and put one in the pending state and one in a different state, like tracked, to show that it's giving me like what's actually left to do. Because if I don't filter the thing properly, it's going to give me the wrong number. So to test that out, we're going to add a common app tracker factory. We're going to create one. I don't know the default state. So I'm calling it status. So it's status, and we want to say common app tracker pending is the one we want to care about. And I also want another one of these, but this time we want, instead of pending, come on, we want tracked. Okay. I haven't imported the model for this, so we'll import the model. It's coming from trackers, so from conductor trackers models, we'll import the model. So now my editor is no longer complaining at me. This, let's change the test ever so slightly, just for a moment, so now we put in the actual dictionary data that has a hard-coded 1 value, but I want to see the test fail. So now I'm going to change it so that the hard-coded 1 won't match the 2, and we're going to build towards this right now, where I want this to pass from this state. So I've created 3 records in the database table that are these common app trackers. The factory that we have is, we'll take a look at that real quick. It's generating a school, it's making up a name, it's giving it a fake slug, and then the status is going to be pending by default, but I wanted to state that explicitly so that it was clear in what the test is doing. But it's just putting 3 records in there. And it passes because I forgot to save. Okay, so now we get 2 does not equal 1. All right, so now it's time to come down here and do this for real. So we're going to want to do the same import that's here and pull from there. And so I'm going to do it like this. We're going to say common app tracker, and we're going to do a query on the database. And the thing that we want to filter for is a status of common app tracker for the pending state, and we want the count. Okay. So Black has cleaned this up for us a little bit. I don't think I like it though, so we're going to extract this as a variable. I'll call it common app count, and I'm going to, whoops, not what I wanted. just yank this. Okay. So we can I see the typo. I don't want the typo. Okay. So now we have something I think a little nicer to read. It's very clear of what we're doing. I hope it's very clear. If it's not, holler in the chat. I'm happy to talk about it, or I will talk about it. And if it's still unclear after I've described it, holler, please. So here's the model that we care about. That the objects that's attached to the model is referred to as a Django manager. And the manager is the interface which you do queries on. So when you want to get records out of the database for a particular model, you'll use the manager, which is on objects by default. You can create extra managers, add extra properties, but this one's just out of the box there for you. We're running a filter, which is equivalent to an SQL where clause. And so the object relational mapper that is built in Django is translating this filter call into the appropriate where clause, where it's looking for a status, and we're using the pending value, which was defined in the model, and it's just a number of 1 or 0, I don't remember which one, and it's at the end it's doing a count on those to say how many records do you have. In the end, after that, we're taking that information and shoving it into a dictionary, and we're providing that as context. Okay, almost done. So that is the working view. And now I want to change this test. Now that it is actually in fact data driven, I think this test like loses some clarity of like, why do you have 2 pending things in here? I think that's kind of dumb. So let's say, let's ditch one of those. This should fail. It does. 2 doesn't equal to 1. Let's drop this down to 1. And now we get what we want. I suppose there is some truth that 2 might have been better because it shows that the count that's coming back is actually for pending, because it's now ambiguous whether it's pending or tracked. But it doesn't matter enough for me. Okay, so let's finish this off. Let's go back to our template. We're going to change this to common app count. Okay. And let's go look at it now. So I'm going to turn the dev server back on. And dun, 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 0. Makes sense. There's nothing. We can go over here and see down at the trackers area that there are none. Let's add one just to prove that this thing is working as we'd expect. And the name, we'll call it University Virginia. Slug is, we'll just say UVA. The state we care about is pending, and I don't feel like adding a school right now because it's not necessary. So now we should have 1 record in there, and if we come back over to the tools dashboard and do a refresh, so what else could we do? If here's something just for fun. Let's learn about a couple of filter tags. So we have this one common app school. That's correct. But let's add another. So university is one of my alma maters, and then I got a master's from Johns Hopkins University. We'll call it JHU, and it'll just be pending as well. And I didn't type university right. Embarrassing. Doesn't really matter. It's test data. So if we come back over here, Now it's grammatically wrong. Now I'm just sort of like having fun though. So let's just be honest. Like I don't really need to correct this, but we can cover a couple of cool things from Django to let you learn a thing or two. In Django, there are built-in what are called, I think they refer to them as Django template filters. And the filters can do a variety of things to your template, like format dates or the comments or all that kind of stuff. One useful one is called pluralize. We're going to go to its definition. And so here we have it. If you have a numeric value, like we do with this common app count, we're able to add this kind of thing to the end of school and use this extra bit of syntax and use this pipe character with pluralize. And that's the filter. And what that will do is add an S. And you can make it smarter. Like if you have, here's an example of word that's not just a straight up S ending, but we have the word school, which is that simple. So we're going to go common app count and give it pipe. We'll do pluralize. So now if we come back to our template, it says schools, hooray. There's one more thing that we could do. No, we don't need to. I was going to say you could also use something called default. So, and there's even a couple of variants of this, I think, that are pay attention to like truthy, falsy kind of values, or the react to none, I believe. I think there are two different filters for that. Why don't we just check? We have the documentation up and I roughly know the name, so I can just tell you. Okay, yeah, they're appropriately named too. So we have default and default if none, which is kind of a special case of default. So, I mean, you can read hopefully as well as I can, but the default is if you have something that is falsy, it will use whatever you put in there. And default if none is specific to the case where the thing in your template is the value none, not just a falsy value. So that, honestly, I think that's where I want to stop this week. So we've reached a good stopping point. I don't want to get too far into the next thing. We will automate OA next time and do some parsing and some other cool stuff. But let's just kind of like recap what we did. Today we made a new dashboard view that's only accessible to staff. We ran some tests to check on the permissions of that thing and make sure that only staff can access it. We then connected a URL route to it so that we could hook it in to the overall dashboard area, which was that link at the top to have tools. And we talked about using reverse on the Python side and using URL on the template side to actually do that lookup of the actual string that is, support tools. So that was that part. The other thing that we did is built out this starting point of a tools dashboard template. I'm going to use this in the future to drop in links that will link off to the tools that we're actually going to build to do the automation work. We have some other things to do that I want to probably check offline and come back to you all next week and let you know what I found. We're using user passes test, and this works, but I would much rather have a decorator that is specifically devoted to checking for staff level permissions. I really feel like that's somewhere in the auth contrib module, but I'm not positive. And this, we're missing a little bit. So I use MyPy to do type checking. And we're missing a couple of places. No, make my pie. Yeah. So I'm missing a type annotation on one of the views, and I'll add that later. It's not terribly exciting. So I'm adding type annotations for all of this code in the hope that if it grows to be a large size one day, I will have the type checks well in advance and accurate so that they can correct me when I'm off base. So I think that kind of concludes the stream for the evening, or concludes the content. I'm going to take all this content and post it over on YouTube. I've got a channel over there and a playlist over there. So if you want to go back and look at previous streams, you're welcome to do that. Be kind about the first one. There was an experiment when I was getting started, so the audio is really terrible. But I think they generally have about this level of quality, which I hope is good enough for you all. And I think there's a lot of good information in there. If you have any questions for me about what we did tonight, please let me know. I probably won't be paying too much more attention to Twitch chat after I stop the stream, but you can follow me on Twitter or message me on Twitter. I'm over there and happy to try and answer. We'll stream again next Wednesday. I don't see any reason why not. I think my calendar's clear that night, and we'll continue on this automation track. If you found the information useful tonight, please follow me on Twitch so that you know when I'm streaming, or if you can manage to remember that I'm streaming on Wednesdays at 9 p.m., you're welcome to just do that. I love feedback. Thank you for the questions today. Thank you TCK3 for jumping in to help out. I really appreciate that. I value this time to teach people, and also a bit of time to work on my side project. So with that, thank you very much, and have a good night.